Hello everyone, enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe and share your thoughts in comments while you watch. The sun hung low over the dusty streets of Lagos, casting an amber hue over the city's sprawling chaos. Vivian sat quietly on the rickety wooden bench outside their cramped two-room apartment, her bare feet dusted with the remnants of the day's errands. At just 9 years old, she already understood the weight of hardship. Her father, Matthew, had been her beacon of hope, a teacher whose wisdom was respected, even if his earnings barely put food on the table. But now, Matthew was gone, and life had become a relentless struggle. Inside the house, Esther, her mother, was pacing nervously. She clutched a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and wiped her brow with the other. The paper bore the address of her elder sister, Ada, a name that sparked equal parts hope and apprehension in her mind. Ada had always been the epitome of success, a wealthy businesswoman living in Abuja. They hadn't spoken in years, but Esther had no other choice. Raising Vivian alone was a task that her dwindling seamstress income couldn't support. "Vivian," Esther called, her voice weary. The girl looked up, her brown eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes, Mama? Come inside. I need to talk to you." Vivian entered the dimly lit room, where the scent of kerosene from their small stove lingered. Esther knelt in front of her daughter, taking her hands gently. "You know things have been hard since Papa left us," Esther began, her voice breaking slightly. Vivian nodded solemnly. "I've written to your Aunty Ada. She's agreed to take you in for a while. She'll give you a better life, better than I can offer right now." Vivian's eyes widened in shock. The thought of leaving her mother and the familiarity of Lagos was terrifying. "But, Mama, I want to stay with you." Esther's heart broke, but she steeled herself. "I know, my child. But this is for the best. Your Aunty Ada will take good care of you. You'll have a chance to go to the best schools and live in a nice house." The following week, Esther packed Vivian's few belongings into a small bag. They boarded an overnight bus to Abuja, the city where dreams were made, or so Esther hoped. The journey was long and uncomfortable, filled with the sounds of wailing children, vendors shouting their wares at every stop, and the occasional hiss of the bus brakes. Vivian clung to her mother, fear and curiosity warring within her. When they arrived at Ada's mansion, Vivian's eyes grew as wide as the iron gates that stood before them. The house was nothing short of a palace, its white walls gleaming under the bright Abuja sun. The sprawling lawn was meticulously landscaped, with fountains and exotic flowers lining the driveway. Ada emerged from the house, her tall frame exuding authority. Dressed in an elegant Ankara gown, she looked every bit the wealthy businesswoman. Her sharp eyes softened as she approached her sister and niece. "Welcome," Ada said, embracing Esther briefly before turning to Vivian. "And this must be the little one." She smiled, though her tone carried the weight of responsibility. Vivian, overwhelmed, merely nodded. Inside, the house was even more magnificent. Chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and polished marble floors reflected the opulence around them. Vivian couldn't help but stare at the large staircase that spiraled upward, leading to rooms she could only dream of. Esther stayed for a few days to help Vivian settle in before leaving for Lagos. The goodbye was tearful. Vivian clung to her mother, her small frame trembling with sobs. "You'll be fine, my love," Esther whispered, brushing back Vivian's hair. "Aunty Ada will take care of you. Be good, and always remember where you come from." As Esther's taxi disappeared down the driveway, Vivian stood by the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt abandoned, thrown into a world she didn't understand. Ada was patient in those early days, making every effort to make Vivian feel at home. She introduced her to the house staff, bought her new clothes, and even set up a small study room with books and supplies. Despite Ada's efforts, Vivian remained distant, her young heart unable to reconcile her longing for her mother with the luxury surrounding her. The mansion had everything a child could dream of, but it lacked the warmth of the small Lagos apartment Vivian had called home. She began to resent Ada, perceiving her stern demeanor as coldness. When Ada enrolled Vivian in one of Abuja's top private schools, the girl found herself among children who flaunted their wealth. They talked about vacations in Dubai, expensive gadgets, and designer clothes. Though Ada had provided for her generously, Vivian began to feel inadequate. Her classmates' casual remarks about wealth ignited a seed of bitterness in her heart. One evening, Ada brought home a new dress for Vivian. It was a beautiful yellow gown adorned with intricate beadwork. "I thought this would look lovely on you," Ada said, placing the dress on Vivian's bed. Vivian glanced at it briefly. "It's okay," she mumbled, looking away. Ada's face tightened. "Is there something wrong with it?" Vivian shrugged. "It's fine, I guess. But my friends' mothers buy them better things." Ada was taken aback. She had spent hours selecting the dress, hoping to see a smile on her niece's face. But she said nothing, choosing instead to leave the room. Months turned into years, and Vivian's attitude hardened. She began spreading rumors among her schoolmates that Ada was a cruel guardian who treated her poorly. The lies reached the ears of visitors and even some of Ada's friends. Neighbors whispered, "Poor girl, living with such a strict auntie," as Vivian painted herself as a victim. Ada, though hurt, never confronted her directly. She believed that Vivian's behavior stemmed from the pain of losing her father and being separated from her mother. "She's just a child," Ada often told herself. "She'll grow out of it." But Vivian's resentment only deepened, and the seeds of ungratefulness began to bloom. Vivian was now 13, blossoming into her teenage years, yet the tension between her and Aunty Ada seemed to grow with every passing day. The once timid girl who had clung to her mother's skirts in Lagos had transformed into a defiant teenager. Though she lived in one of Abuja's most opulent mansions and attended a prestigious school, Vivian's attitude reeked of entitlement and discontent. Ada, ever the patient guardian, continued to pour her resources into providing for Vivian, but nothing seemed to please the girl. If Ada bought her a phone, Vivian would complain that it wasn't the latest model. If she took her shopping, Vivian would criticize the selections or scoff at the prices, declaring that Ada was stingy compared to the parents of her classmates. It wasn't long before the staff in the house noticed Vivian's behavior. "Madame Ada treats her like a queen," the cook, Mama Nkechi, whispered one evening to the housekeeper, Ruth. "But that child behaves like she's been thrown in prison." "True talk," Ruth replied. "Even with all the money Madame spends on her, she's never satisfied. It's like her heart is made of stone." The whispers didn't stop within the household. Vivian, emboldened by her classmates, began spreading false stories about Ada to anyone who would listen. At school, she told her friends that Ada was cruel and miserly, withholding things she wanted and treating her like a servant. "You wouldn't believe it," Vivian would say dramatically. "She makes me clean the house and do my own laundry, like I'm some common maid." Her friends, many of whom had never met Ada, took her words at face value. "How can someone so rich treat you like that?" one of them asked, wide-eyed. "She's just jealous of me," Vivian replied, a smirk curling her lips. "She doesn't want me to outshine her." Ada's generosity. Ada, unaware of the rumors, continued to care for Vivian as best as she could. For her 14th birthday, Ada organized a small celebration at the house, inviting a few of Vivian's school friends and their parents. The dining room was decorated with balloons, and a towering cake in Vivian's favorite color, pink, stood proudly on the table. Ada had gone out of her way to make the day special, ordering Vivian a custom-made dress and buying her a new iPhone. But as the guests arrived, Vivian barely acknowledged her aunt's efforts. When her friends gushed over the cake and decorations, Vivian rolled her eyes. "It's nothing special," she muttered. "Other people's parents throw way bigger parties. This is just small." Ada overheard the comment but said nothing. Her heart ached, but she refused to let it ruin the day. She stood silently in the corner, watching as Vivian basked in the attention of her friends, acting as though she had orchestrated the entire event herself. The parents of Vivian's friends, however, were less forgiving. One of them approached Ada during the party. "Madame Ada, I've heard some troubling things," the woman began hesitantly. Ada frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," the woman said, glancing toward Vivian, "your niece has been telling people that you don't treat her well. She says you deny her things she needs and make her do housework." Ada's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly, her voice steady. I'll look into it. The confrontation. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the house had returned to its usual quiet, Ada called Vivian into the living room. Vivian, she began, her tone calm but firm. I need to ask you something. Vivian, still wearing her pink party dress, looked up from her phone. What is it, Auntie? I heard today that you've been telling people I mistreat you, Ada said, her eyes boring into Vivian's. Is it true? Vivian hesitated for a moment but then shrugged. Well, it's not like you treat me like a princess or anything. You're always so strict, and you don't buy me everything I want. Ada stared at her niece in disbelief. Vivian, do you have any idea how much I've sacrificed for you? I've given you a home, the best education, everything you could possibly need. And this is how you repay me? By lying to people? Vivian crossed her arms, defiance flashing in her eyes. I'm just telling the truth. If you really cared about me, you'd do more. Ada took a deep breath, fighting to keep her composure. You are ungrateful, Vivian. But I will not give up on you. One day, you'll understand everything I've done for you. Until then, I will continue to do my duty as your guardian, no matter how much you resent me. Vivian rolled her eyes. Whatever, Auntie. Ada felt a wave of despair wash over her but refused to let it show. She had promised Esther she would take care of Vivian, and she intended to keep that promise, even if it broke her heart. The gossip spreads. Vivian's lies continued to spread through the neighborhood, fueled by her constant complaints to her classmates and their parents. Soon, Ada's reputation began to suffer. People who once admired her success and generosity now whispered behind her back. Can you imagine? A rich woman like that treating her own niece poorly, one neighbor said. It's always the ones who look good on the outside, another replied. Ada heard the rumors but chose to rise above them. She focused on her work and continued to provide for Vivian, hoping that her niece would one day see the truth. Small acts of kindness. Despite Vivian's hostility, Ada never stopped trying to connect with her. One evening, Ada came home with a pair of matching necklaces, one for herself and one for Vivian. The pendants were shaped like hearts, symbolizing their bond as family. I thought we could wear these together, Ada said, handing one to Vivian. Vivian took the necklace without much enthusiasm. Thanks, I guess. She tossed it onto her bedside table and went back to scrolling through her phone. Ada sighed, feeling the sting of rejection once again. But she refused to give up. As the weeks turned into months, the gap between Ada and Vivian widened. Ada's unwavering patience was met with Vivian's growing entitlement. While Ada hoped that time would heal the wounds in their relationship, Vivian seemed determined to pull further away, blinded by her own bitterness and misconceptions. But deep in her heart, Ada knew that life had a way of teaching lessons, even to the most stubborn of souls. The years continued to pass, and Vivian's attitude toward Aunty Ada remained unchanged. Now 19, Vivian had fully embraced her sense of entitlement, while Ada's patience was beginning to wear thin. Despite the endless efforts Ada made to show kindness and provide for her niece, Vivian only grew more resentful. She clung to the false narrative she had spun about Ada's supposed cruelty, reinforcing her lies to friends, visitors, and anyone who would listen. Ada, however, was unyielding in her commitment. She often reminded herself of the promise she had made to Esther, to care for Vivian as though she were her own child. It was a promise that kept her going, even when her heart ached from the betrayal of the girl she had raised. An unexpected visit. One bright Saturday morning, Vivian sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone while ignoring the soft hum of the television in the background. She was deep into an Instagram post about a friend's luxurious vacation when she heard the doorbell ring. Ruth? Vivian called lazily. Someone's at the door. The housekeeper, Ruth, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She opened the door to find Esther standing there, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Esther. You're welcome, Ruth said, stepping aside to let her in. Esther stumbled into the house, clutching a handkerchief tightly in her hands. Vivian looked up, startled to see her mother. Mama, she said, her brows furrowing. What are you doing here? Esther didn't answer immediately. She sank onto the couch, her body shaking with silent sobs. Vivian sat up, her phone forgotten. "What's wrong, Mama? What happened?" she asked, a flicker of concern breaking through her usual indifference. Esther took a deep breath and looked at her daughter, her voice trembling. "Vivian, your Aunt Ada, she's gone." The words hit Vivian like a thunderclap. For a moment, she couldn't comprehend what her mother was saying. "Gone," she repeated, her voice rising. "What do you mean, gone?" "She passed away," Esther said, her tears flowing freely now. "It happened suddenly. The doctor said it was a heart attack." Vivian stared at her mother, her mind reeling. The woman she had spent years resenting and maligning was gone? Aunty Ada, who had taken her in, clothed her, fed her, and provided her with every opportunity, was no longer alive? But even as a lump formed in her throat, a selfish thought crept into her mind. What will happen to me now? The lawyer's visit. 2 days later, the atmosphere in the mansion was tense. Esther had stayed with Vivian to offer support, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her daughter's grief was superficial. While Esther mourned the loss of her sister, Vivian seemed more preoccupied with what would happen to her comfortable life. On the third day, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. He introduced himself as Mr. Adebayo, Ada's lawyer. "I've come to read Madame Ada's will," he announced, his tone formal. Vivian's heart raced. She sat upright on the couch as Mr. Adebayo opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "As you know, Madame Ada was a woman of significant wealth and property," Mr. Adebayo began. "Before her passing, she drafted a will outlining how her assets should be distributed." He paused, glancing at Esther and Vivian. "In her will, Madame Ada left everything to her niece, Vivian. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, all of it." For a moment, there was silence. Then Vivian's face broke into a wide grin. "Everything?" she asked, hardly able to contain her excitement. "Yes," Mr. Adebayo confirmed. "Everything is now in your name. However, she expressed a wish that you use the wealth responsibly and support the family members who may need your help." Vivian barely heard the last part. Her mind was already racing with possibilities. She was now the sole owner of a massive fortune. A life of lavish spending. In the weeks that followed, Vivian transformed the mansion into a hub of endless parties. Friends, many of whom had only been acquaintances before, flocked to her side, eager to bask in her newfound wealth. Music blared through the once serene house, and the living room became a dance floor littered with empty bottles and discarded plates. Vivian spared no expense on herself, buying designer clothes, the latest gadgets, and expensive jewelry. Her social media pages were filled with pictures of her extravagant lifestyle, from champagne-filled nights to shopping sprees in the city's most exclusive boutiques. Esther watched her daughter with a heavy heart. "Vivian, this isn't what your Aunty Ada wanted," she said one evening, her voice firm. "She left you this wealth so you could build a future, not waste it on frivolities." Vivian scoffed. "Mama, stop worrying. There's more than enough money. I'll be fine." A cry for help. One afternoon, a woman appeared at the mansion's gate. It was Ejiro, Vivian's father's sister, accompanied by her teenage daughter, Amanda. Ejiro's face was gaunt, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Vivian," she said, her voice pleading, "I've come to ask for your help. Amanda's school fees are due, and I don't have the money. I'm also unwell and can't work as much as I used to. Please help us." Vivian looked at her aunt disdainfully. "You want my money?" she asked, her tone cold. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate," Ejiro replied, tears streaming down her face. Vivian folded her arms. "Fine. But on one condition, you and Amanda will clean this house every day. If you agree, I'll help you." Ejiro hesitated but eventually nodded. "We'll do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mistreatment and humiliation. From that day forward, Ejiro and Amanda worked tirelessly in the mansion, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and doing laundry. Vivian treated them like servants, barking orders and mocking their efforts. When her friends visited, she encouraged them to laugh at Ejiro and Amanda, delighting in their humiliation. "Look at them," she would say, smirking. "They're so desperate, they'll do anything for money." Ejiro endured the treatment in silence, her pride swallowed by her need to provide for Amanda. A shocking phone call. 2 weeks later, Vivian received an unexpected call from the family doctor. "Miss Vivian," the doctor said, his tone grave. "I need you to come to the hospital immediately. There's something important I need to tell you." Vivian frowned. "Is something wrong?" "Just come," the doctor insisted. Curious and slightly annoyed, Vivian drove to the hospital. When she arrived, the doctor led her into his office and closed the door. "What's this about?" Vivian asked impatiently. The doctor's expression was serious. "It's about your Aunty Ada," he said. Vivian's heart skipped a beat. "What about her?" "She's alive," the doctor said simply. The words hit Vivian like a slap. She stared at the doctor, her mind reeling. "Alive? That's impossible. Mama said she died." "There was a mistake," the doctor explained. "She had a severe heart attack but was revived. She's been recovering in a private facility." Vivian's face turned pale. If Aunty Ada was alive, it meant she would return, and Vivian's reckless spending and cruel behavior would be exposed. The revelation that Aunty Ada was alive left Vivian in a state of panic. As she drove home from the hospital, her mind raced with thoughts of what her aunt would do once she discovered everything that had transpired. Vivian had squandered a significant portion of Ada's wealth, turned the house into a party venue, and treated her own relatives cruelly. The weight of her actions was beginning to suffocate her, but instead of taking responsibility, she resorted to anger and defiance. The return of Aunty Ada. A week later, the day arrived. Aunty Ada, now fully recovered, stepped out of a black SUV and walked up to the mansion she had called home for years. She looked healthier, though slightly thinner, and her face carried a stern expression. Ruth, the housekeeper, greeted her with tears of joy. "Madam, you're back." "Thank God," Ruth exclaimed. Ada gave her a small smile before stepping inside. The house was unrecognizable. The once tidy living room was littered with empty bottles, stained cushions, and torn curtains. The sight was enough to make her pause in disbelief. "Ruth, what happened here?" she asked, her voice heavy with concern. Before Ruth could respond, Vivian came downstairs, her expression a mix of shock and defiance. "Aunt Ada, I didn't think you'd be back so soon," she said, trying to mask her fear with a forced smile. Ada's eyes narrowed as she took in her niece's disheveled appearance. "Clearly," she said coldly, "we need to talk." The reckoning. In the dining room, Ada sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room. Vivian sat across from her, fidgeting nervously. Esther, who had been staying with Vivian, joined them, her face pale with worry. "I want to know everything," Ada said, her tone firm. "What happened while I was gone?" Vivian hesitated, searching for an excuse, but before she could speak, Ruth entered the room with a bundle of receipts and documents. "Madam, I've been keeping track of everything Miss Vivian has done," Ruth said, placing the papers in front of Ada. "She spent millions on parties, clothes, and gadgets. She even refused to help Madame Ejiro and her daughter unless they worked as servants." Ada's face hardened as she flipped through the papers. "Vivian," she said, her voice low but dangerous, "is this true?" Vivian's defenses crumbled. "Auntie, I didn't mean to. I thought you were gone for good. I didn't know how to handle everything." Ada slammed her hand on the table, startling Vivian and Esther. "You didn't know how to handle it because you've never taken responsibility for anything in your life," she shouted. "I gave you everything, Vivian, everything. And this is how you repay me? By destroying my home and humiliating your own family?" Tears streamed down Vivian's face, but Ada's anger didn't waver. Ejiro and Amanda's testimony. At that moment, Ejiro and Amanda entered the room. Their presence seemed to drain the last bit of fight from Vivian. "Madame Ada," Ejiro began, her voice trembling, "I didn't want to bother you while you were gone, but I have to tell you what happened. Vivian made us work as cleaners in your house just so she could give us a little money for Amanda's school fees. She treated us like slaves, yelling at us and mocking us in front of her friends." Amanda, standing silently beside her mother, nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with shame and sadness. Ada looked at Vivian, her disappointment palpable. Do you see now, Vivian? Do you see the damage you've caused? Your actions have brought shame not only to yourself but to this entire family. Vivian sobbed, unable to meet her aunt's gaze. The punishment. After a long silence, Ada spoke again, her voice calmer but no less firm. Vivian, I have made my decision. You will leave this house. You will return to the village, where you can reflect on your actions and learn the value of humility and hard work. Vivian's head snapped up, her face a mask of shock. No, Auntie, please. Don't send me back to the village. I can change, I promise. Ada shook her head. It's too late for promises, Vivian. You need to face the consequences of your actions. Esther, who had been silent until now, pleaded with her sister. Ada, please, she's just a child. Give her another chance. She is no longer a child, Esther, Ada replied. She is a grown woman who made deliberate choices. This is for her own good. A new beginning for Amanda. Turning to Ejiro and Amanda, Ada's expression softened. Ejiro, you and Amanda will stay here with me. Amanda deserves a chance at a better life, and I will make sure she gets it. You will no longer have to struggle alone. Ejiro fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Madam Ada. God bless you. Amanda smiled shyly, her gratitude evident. Vivian's departure. The next morning, a taxi arrived to take Vivian back to the village. She stood at the gate, her belongings packed into a single suitcase. Ada watched from the front porch, her expression unreadable. Auntie, I'm sorry, Vivian said, her voice breaking. I hope you truly are, Ada replied. And I hope you use this time to grow into a better person. Goodbye, Vivian. As the taxi drove away, Vivian looked back at the mansion, the life of luxury she had taken for granted slipping further from view. For the first time, she realized the full weight of her actions, but it was too late. Ada's new focus. With Vivian gone, Ada turned her attention to Amanda. She enrolled the girl in a prestigious school and ensured that Ejiro received the medical care she needed. The house, once filled with chaos and noise, became a place of peace and purpose. Ada knew she had made the right decision. While Vivian had brought her heartache, she was determined to use her resources to uplift those who truly valued her kindness. Months passed, and life in the mansion took on a new rhythm. Aunty Ada poured her energy into Amanda's education and Ejiro's well-being. The house was no longer a hub of chaos but a sanctuary of peace and gratitude. Meanwhile, Vivian's life in the village was far from what she had imagined. The village life. The transition to the village was a rude awakening for Vivian. She moved into a modest home shared with extended family members who treated her with disdain. Once surrounded by luxury, she now faced a life of hardship. She had no servants to cater to her needs and no money to sustain her extravagant habits. Vivian struggled with the simplest tasks, fetching water from the well, cooking meals over an open fire, and farming in the sweltering sun. Her former friends who had once flocked to her parties were nowhere to be found. The villagers whispered about her fall from grace, and children giggled as they passed her on the dusty roads. For weeks, Vivian wallowed in self-pity, blaming everyone but herself for her predicament. But as time wore on, the harsh realities of village life began to chip away at her arrogance. A humbling experience. One day, while fetching water, Vivian overheard two women talking about her. She thought she was better than everyone, one woman said, shaking her head. Now look at her, the other replied. She's no different from the rest of us. The words stung, but they also made Vivian reflect. For the first time, she began to see how her pride and entitlement had alienated her from those who had loved and cared for her. Vivian started to make small changes. She helped her relatives with chores, apologized to those she had wronged in the village, and even began attending church regularly. Her transformation was slow but sincere. A letter to Aunty Ada. As weeks turned into months, Vivian's longing to make amends with Aunty Ada grew stronger. One evening, she sat down with a pen and paper and poured her heart out in a letter. Dear Aunty Ada, I hope this letter finds you well. I know I am the last person you want to hear from, but I beg you to read this. I want to say that I am sorry, truly sorry for everything I did. You gave me everything, and I repaid you with lies, disrespect, and selfishness. I let my pride blind me to all the sacrifices you made for me. I see now how wrong I was, and I regret every moment I wasted. Life in the village has taught me humility. I've learned the value of hard work and the importance of family. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart to give me another chance. Yours sincerely, Vivian. She sealed the letter and gave it to a friend traveling to the city, hoping it would reach Ada. A visit from Ada. A few weeks later, Vivian was in the fields when she saw a black SUV pull up near her home. Her heart raced as she recognized the car. It was Aunty Ada's. Ada stepped out, her expression unreadable. Vivian, covered in sweat and dirt, hesitated before walking over. "Auntie," she said softly, her voice trembling. Ada looked her over, taking in the changes. Vivian was thinner, her once polished nails chipped and her hair tied back in a simple scarf. But there was something different in her eyes, a humility and sincerity that Ada hadn't seen before. "I received your letter," Ada said, her tone even. "I meant every word," Vivian replied. "I'm sorry for everything, Auntie." Ada sighed. "Vivian, do you know how much pain you caused me? I took you in, loved you, and treated you as my own. But you repaid me with lies and disrespect. Do you think a simple apology can erase all that?" Vivian shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, Auntie. I know it can't. But I want to make things right, whatever it takes." The test of redemption. Ada studied her niece for a long moment before speaking. "If you truly want to change, you'll have to prove it. I'm giving you one chance. You will return to the city with me, but you will not live in the mansion. You will stay in the servants' quarters and work as Ruth's assistant. You will earn your place back into the family." Vivian nodded, her tears falling freely. "I'll do it, Auntie. Thank you for giving me another chance." A new beginning. Back in the city, Vivian embraced her new life with determination. She worked tirelessly alongside Ruth, cleaning the house, cooking meals, and tending to Ada's needs. The same friends who had once laughed at Ejiro and Amanda now mocked Vivian, but she ignored them. Ada watched from a distance, her heart softening as she saw her niece's transformation. Over time, she began to trust Vivian again, allowing her small privileges and responsibilities. The circle of kindness. Ejiro and Amanda remained in the mansion, thriving under Ada's care. Amanda excelled in school, often expressing her gratitude to the woman who had changed her life. One day, Vivian approached Amanda with a sincere smile. "Amanda, I know I hurt you and your mom. I hope you can forgive me and give me a chance to be a better cousin." Amanda hesitated before smiling back. "I forgive you, Vivian. Everyone deserves a second chance." Conclusion. Years later, Vivian became a strong, independent woman. She dedicated her life to helping others, inspired by Ada's generosity and unwavering love. The lessons she learned stayed with her forever, reminding her that true wealth isn't measured by material possessions but by the relationships and values we hold dear. And though Ada's journey with Vivian had been fraught with pain, it ultimately became a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of family bonds. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.